This is the Outlander Club. Grab a snack, grab a drink, sit back and relax as James talks with a special guest to discuss their Star Wars story.
This is the Outlander Club, and today I am joined with...
HeatOveride. Oh, yeah. Call me Rob if you like.
No, Heat. H-O-H-O-R. As I said, I actually pronounce this horse, so maybe we'll stick with Rob.
People will catch that. I just about you come in, come in fire, catch them off. You know, you got a lot going on when you got Vader over your shoulders. So
Vader's coming after you.
I'm trying to stay alive today.
That's why you're the Heat. All right, this is the Outlander Club. This is your Star Wars story where you tell us all about how you became a Star Wars fan and what kept you a Star Wars fan. And why you're still a Star Wars fan since the sequel trilogy is about to get retconned and rebooted in every way. Look at that. Do you call him Baby Yoda or Grogu?
It really bounces between the two. That's the funny part because, as the story progresses, like me and my daughter, we run around and it's still Baby Yoda for the most part. But then like every once in a while, I'll be like, Grogu. She'll be like, what? Like, it just throws people off. It does. It really does.
It really does. And I love that the show and Book of Boba Fett both acknowledged the name being what it is. Like with Grief Karga and Pelimoto and Book of Boba Fett. Like, that's a horrible name. I love that I love that they play on it. They know what the fans think and they don't care because I'm the same though. I bounce between Baby Yoda and Grogu all the time too. I'm like, it depends on who I'm talking to and the mood that I'm in because I think I want to know what the script, and I don't know if anyone's seen this or if you have, we're going to get to this soon, but the script for the first episode of The Mandalorian said, because obviously he was the child, but they had to describe him in the script, right? So was the child and Boba and Din Djarin sees a child, I imagine is what it said, and the child is Yoda's species, or did it say the child is a baby version of Yoda? Like, what did it say? Because they were like, we don't call him Baby Yoda. But how did you describe that it was Baby Yoda without being Baby Yoda? You liars.
They have drawings. They have drawings.
Oh, adorable drawings.
So they're just like, here's a drawing right here. They were drawing something up like that. And then they're like, well, that's just the Baby Yoda. And they're like, no, we're going to call him Grogu. And they're like, well, when are you going to let that be known? And then they're like, well, after we call him the child first.
Yeah, we got to sell the child merch and then rebrand it as Grogu merch. And then probably rebrand it as Baby Yoda merch as well. I love it. They probably got the guys that made Muppet Babies and Flintstones kids to do the Baby Yoda. That would be that's a
nice
cartoon.
Guest appearance. That would be a nice guest appearance.
This is the show that Disney Plus needs, like an animated show for kids. Star Wars babies. Like, take us back 40 years, Star Wars babies. You have actual Baby Yoda hanging out with actual baby Anakin. It would be phenomenal. Let's do it, Disney.
It'd be like you said, like Baby Muppets.
Yeah, exactly. It would be so good.
Exactly. Like anything works.
All right, now
that roll them in.
Now that our pitch is out of the way to Disney, let's get into your Star Wars story. Do you remember the first time you saw Star Wars or were introduced to Star Wars?
So what was crazy is my dad was a Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson fan growing up. So I had to seek out other ways to know about Star Wars, which ended up being my friends because all I was getting was Death Wish 1, Death Wish 2, Death Wish 3. And we're watching Fear No Evil or whatever, Hear No Evil. And I'm thinking, I'm like, and so I was watching Star Trek weekly. So yes, I actually started out as kind of like a Trek dude, and I kept watching it, and we got Spock and we're having fun, and then me and my buddies were talking. They're like, "Do you ever see Star Wars?" I was like, "No, I haven't." And he was like, "You need to see Star Wars." So for them, it was kind of a playoff because they already knew everything, and I was like, "Dang!" Because my oldest friend of all time, he's a couple of years older than me, so he had already seen it. I had watched the first one when it came on, like it was one of those, I think it was week TVs on the ABC movie night or something. And we watched it and we always had HBO. And I was like, oh man, like the minute I fell in love with Luke right from the go, because, it's that curiosity, the thing. And then I didn't understand why Obi-Wan disappeared though. That did throw me off at first, but it threw you off too, right?
Yeah. I'd imagine it did. I don't remember. Like I remember for certain questions from Star Wars. I don't remember that one. But I always remembered him. There was a lot in Star Wars, I gotta say, that I did not understand or follow because you're like 2, 3, 4 years. You grow up with it. You don't have any idea. So
Yeah.
your first experience was on TV
Yeah.
watching it. I think my first might have been similar because I remember my VHS tape of
Mhm.
Star Wars was I believe it was on Fox, and it had like just before the commercial breaks they have like the Fox graphics come in. So I think that was my first time watching it was on that too, or my grandmother's beta tape. It was one of those two for sure.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm old. That's how far back we go.
no, I mean we all are, but that's that's the best part of it is we got to experience it from like why? I mean, that whole Charles Bronson, Bruce Lee, all that generation was kind of like the action movies were kind of passing over. And then here was coming in the sci-fi kind of things, I mean, you're getting Running Man around this time. We all know about Space Odyssey, and then of course you're getting this, the original trilogy. So, it gets to the next one. I was like, I needed more. So when I got to the Empire Strikes Back and I watched that, it just immediately starting off, I was like, man, this is going to be really, really, really good.
Do you
And
remember? Do you remember how far apart that was from A New Hope? Do you remember like there's a time there was a long gap, or were they already both out and you had the
they were
opportunity
both
to see them
out.
back?
Yeah. I
Okay,
was
okay.
born in 78. So that's kind of where, so when I was watching these practically about like 84, 85.
All right, yeah.
So, that time. So first, second grade for me, technically. So,
So they were
I
available
would,
to you.
yes, they were. They were. So we went, we had like back in the day, we had the old, rental places. So yeah, we got Empire, got that. And then finally got Jedi. And that's right there. I still I agree with what you talk about every time you say that Return of the Jedi is literally still, you're always going to be number one. It's everything in that film, the overcoming, the coming, Vader coming back and finally sticking up for Luke, the double turn pretty much. It's almost like wrestling's greatest story between Hitman and Stone Cold Steve Austin. He got that turn and it was so crazy because in a lot of movies that you watch and how it's scripted, you kind of get that, but nothing was more stronger than that moment because you want to go back to when Luke was walking with Vader in that hallway on Endor. Yeah. And he was talking to him and he was trying to already change him then. But he
Mm.
was telepathically talking to him too, which a lot of people don't understand is you just hear the words. You don't hear that he's also searching Vader's thoughts and that he's feeling out to him in the force as well, which also amplifies that, which made Return of the Jedi amazing.
You said it. I do agree with that, of course. And I think for like when you're a little kid and you don't see all of that, there's still the little guys overcoming, and then obviously
Mhm.
Ewoks are amazing. But there is a story about redemption there and hope, and then the heroes win, and that's I mean, and if Star Wars is for kids, as George Lucas always liked to say it was, whether or not it was from the get go, we don't know. But he likes to say it now that he made his living off of toys. If it is
Yeah.
for kids, then that movie is the perfect movie. And I think we're going to get to it. We won't talk about it yet, but the Phantom Menace mirrors that in a lot of ways. And while
Yeah.
you and I might not have been kids then, there were kids who probably saw it from the same, but they had to watch the story in reverse. We saw it like, oh boy, oh, it got dark. Okay, we won. They saw from we won. Oh, what happened? So they got the
Yep.
reverse story, but then they had 3 more that they can go back and then see how it all turns to light. So you went to the video store. I miss video stores. I was thinking about this the other day because when you go on like Netflix and like and
Mhm.
you're searching, you could search for hours. Everyone's like, I searched for hours. I can never find anything. It was the
Yep.
same in the stores like Blockbuster or whatever. It was the
Yeah.
same there, but you kind of felt like obligated, like you had to leave with something. So you always chose something, and
Of
it
course.
wasn't always good what you chose. But you felt whereas Netflix, you don't. I walk away now. I'm like, well, I don't need to, and I just walk away. But the old
You,
video stores,
you didn't
you
give me
had to walk
nothing.
out with something.
You have to. So we had a local video place called Real Entertainment here, and they came out with this 5 movies, 5 days, $5. No new releases,
Oh,
just the old stuff. So then we started getting all the horror flicks from back then,
oh,
like the mid 80s horror flicks, like just for that. We
yeah.
would just go grab, throw a few dollars in, make the $5.30, go home, and that would be what we would watch all night long. I mean, we've seen things like Three on a Meat Hook, the original Blood Lake, which was shot,
Oh
I
my
think,
god.
just a VHS.
Probably.
It was so bad. But I also even branched off into kung fu flicks and Mandarin films. So the funny thing about that is they got this whole Mandarin set for the Wu-Tang. I rented them all, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that rented them all because they ended up in the for sale for like $2 each, and I bought them all. Every single one of
Oh
them, still
yeah.
have them to
Oh
this
man.
day.
The used bin of the movies that people did not buy, the gems you could pick up. People will never understand that, but the gems you could grab. It was
Oh
so good
man,
because the other thing, and look, I'm a big streamer. I went all digital. I don't buy I don't do the physical stuff anymore. I don't have room for it,
I agree with
and
you.
I'm very lazy, right? I like to just what's on the TV, but
I can't dust it off all the time.
but those movies that you're talking about, you wouldn't buy them on streaming or on digital because you wouldn't find them, right? They're like the diamonds in the rough that are hidden somewhere.
Yep.
They have to be in the bin for you to see them and pick them out.
Mhm.
Okay, so you rent Return of the Jedi and you're all
Yeah.
in on Star Wars, but then Star Wars kind of just stops. Did you
Yep.
watch like the droids and Ewoks cartoons or the Ewoks movies at all?
No, I actually, for some reason, I didn't have access to that. And right around then, you got to think I was about 10 years
Yeah,
old at this time, late 80s, going 10, 12, because, 88. And so for me, music had started playing into my, uh, you know, everything what I was doing, and it was kind of leading into where I was like playing a little more sports and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I never went out and bought the comics. However, I did buy the games. I played a lot of games like when we talked about that before.
yeah,
And really it wasn't until, when you got to like I'll predate the Shadows of the Empire because that was the one that was really like that started intriguing me. But flip back the original Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes
yeah,
Back, and Super Return of the Jedi, to actually know that those movies have those movies and then have those games and play those games and to see how the progression of Luke actually happened in those games, it just brought it all back for me, honestly. Because outside of that, when I got these games, the timeline starts right there. So I play all three of those games. They come out in order. You get the
yeah.
Shadows of the Empire, which, by the way, I mean, everybody that's played that game, the story was amazing. The way that he worked with Luke, it just was awesome. It was around 98 when I had, my older daughter. So when the prequels came out, she was old enough to actually take to the theaters, which then I showed her the 4, 5, 6 format and explained to her, we're going back now. So she did the 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, kind of like that, gave that choice to her. And that was like, me passing it on, but also how it worked from there too, because this story is going to sound like a repeat story when I talk about the sequels.
So let's go back to the Star Wars games because you're like there's a dark period then for a few years between
Yeah.
Jedi and the games. And obviously you had a Super Nintendo, I'm guessing, or somebody you knew had a Super Nintendo. And what did you rent the game or was it like gifted to you? How did you get the
No, I
first
rented
one?
it. Rented it from Real Entertainment. I rented that, and I rented each one of them in a row before I actually went out and bought them, or I probably bought them off of the thing because they would put their games after they had made so much money. They would put the games out that weren't moving anymore, and yeah, it would be a discounted price. It'd be like $5 or
Mhm.
$4, $3 for a Super Nintendo game. I mean, you couldn't beat that.
No, that's how
So
I bought a lot of my games too. I would like wait when they hit the U shelf, pick them up. Or there was an outlet store I used to go to all the time too, and they had the games cheap and
Mhm.
like cheap
Yeah, and that was
discounted.
so I will kick myself in the butt. They put Ninja Gaiden Trilogy for the Super Nintendo there, and I looked at it, and I was getting paid the next day, and my buddy was like, "Hey, man, I got money on me right now. I'll give you that." And he was trying to buy something. He was like, "This will be here tomorrow." I told him no. I came back the next day, and that game was gone. It's not even worth it.
Ah,
And it's worth so much money now, so much money. But just to have, not to, I own it for like my Wii U and my Switch and stuff. It's just not the same
it's
because
not the
just to
same.
have the actual Super NES cart, that's like one of those
Yeah.
things that just eluded me. So yeah, like getting there and replaying that game, that of course ignites, like I was saying, ignites that passion in you. I still didn't seek out Star Wars at that time in comic form because at that point I was reading Hellblazer, which John Constantine is my day one A1 Hellblazer comic strip of all time. I wasn't even old enough to buy it. Dude sold it to me because that's how we got through things back in the day.
It's
And
true.
I mean, it was an 18 plus. It was, dude, the first time I read Hellblazer, I was introduced to like the whole British life, their slang, and just how demonic and how crazy that comic was. So I didn't, again, there was nothing. It was those games. And like I said, when I got up the Shadows of the Empire, that game made me go buy Shadows of the Empire book. And that's what actually where it started the Star Wars books for me too.
Mm.
Because, you know, popping up to, you know, the Phantom Menace, when that came out and I was able to go see that in the theater and to experience the flying, you know, the pod racing, people hate on it. I don't care how cheesy any of these actors act. I don't care if they have emotion. You can't tell me when Annie wins that race, you ain't happy that when you were seeing that on a big screen that didn't make you feel good. And I can't relate to all those EU people either because like, yo, you like that. Just enjoy that Star Wars. Don't be angry. Be happy we get it. I mean, we get a lot of it now. So they
It
ignore
is
it.
weird. It is weird though that the fandom seems to be overcritical of things on the screen. But if you put it
Yeah.
on a page, it's like, no, it's great. It's like, no, it's just as ridiculous. How can you like one and not the other? Like people are praising the Rock Geode in the High Republic, but they're hating on, you know, something a Grogu jumping in the Mandalorian. It's like I don't. How are you like? Where's your thought? I don't understand that, and I haven't read the High Republic, so I can't comment on Geode at all.
I
Let's
haven't either.
Okay, so we're on the same. Let's go back to Shadow of the Empire. You love the Star Wars games. There, by the way, those the Super Star Wars games are fantastic. If you haven't played them, you got to find a way to play them.
Yeah.
They're on, I think, some of like the cheap knockoff consoles. And I have a
Yep.
PS4, the Darth Vader PS4. My wife got it for me for Christmas. I got 8 years ago, whatever it was, and it came with the first Super Star Wars was one of the games in it, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted the PS4 over the Xbox because I was like, I want to play Super Star Wars and Pod Racer Revenge. Like those are the two games I wanted to play because
Yes.
Super Star Wars and Super Empire Strikes Back and Super Return of the Jedi are three, I think, under discussed games that were way more fun than
Truly
I think they had. Like Star Wars was gone at that point, and these games were phenomenal. But
Yeah,
Shadows of the Empire,
hard.
but they were, but they didn't bring Star Wars back into the forefront for I don't think for anybody. But Shadows of the Empire did, and it was, I believe, it was like George Lucas's kind of like test to see if there was still a market for Star Wars on the big screen before he started going into the prequels. So Shadows of the Empire was a game, like you said, a novel, a soundtrack, and a comic, and then obviously there was a line of toys. I'm guessing. I was in my teens at that point. You would have been as well. I'm guessing you weren't getting the toys so much, but did you do like, and I know you weren't doing comics, but did you end up reading that novel? Because the novel was a big deal as well as a game.
Yes,
Did you end up
yes,
reading
I
the
did
novel
read
and
that.
anything?
The novel was amazing. That's what really started. That's like I said. So to read the Shadows of the Empire novel, which I've definitely lost by now. I literally read it like once and then just put it down and just that. But you know, that really opened it up. And going into that, that's where if me and other people like me, yourself, wanted more, that's when it was like, wait a minute, why aren't we getting any Star Wars? Like, come on, like this is a good story. We need Shadows of the Empire Part 2. We need more of this background. And that's where, you know, like you said, that may have been the spark, the fire that lit Lucas to finally get to the prequels and get to the Phantom Menace, which then, of course, introduced us to some of the. I don't care who you are and how great, and we were going to talk on it, how great Anakin versus Obi-Wan in episode 3 is. You cannot undermine that Darth Maul fight with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn. So amazing. And to listen when Duel of the Fates hit for the first time since all of us were kids, we had not got anything because, like you said, people didn't play the Super Nintendo games. And if you could actually get past the first level of the Super Nintendo game, you like Super Star Wars, you were like, oh, wait a minute. See that a lot of people didn't make it. They got to the sand crawler and they were done with it. But when you got later in that game, you got stronger. And I will say this, each game, Luke got stronger. In the second game, He had powers, but not many. In that third game, he had literally like 12 or 8 different powers. So when you get to see that and you hear Duel of the Fates hit after only getting Shadows of the Empire music previously, Duel of the Fates, I was gone. Like, I went and bought. I still have it to this day. I have the soundtrack. Why not? It's amazing.
Duel of the Fates. I think we'll talk about it a little bit, but John Williams to me peaked. He hit his peak at the prequels. Like he was, or I shouldn't say, he was peak John Williams at the prequels. I think that was some of his best stuff. Shadows of the Empire, though, you mentioned a good point about how they were like, were we getting more Star Wars? And I think young people today, early 20s, whatever, they might not understand, like, because Marvel's been around now for 15 years, whatever it is. And Star Wars obviously has lived on, and there's all these franchises. But back then, franchises weren't really a thing in theatrically. Like they were like 3 movies. It was like 3 movies done. 3 movies done. Lethal Weapon threw in a 4th one at the end. But it was always like, it was kind of like they hit their peak, and then the actors were like, I don't want to be typecast. I'm not going to do anymore. And it was a very different time because like they hadn't figured it out. Like movies hadn't figured this out yet. It was taking a while, and it took Marvel. I would say it took Marvel to really do it. I mean, the prequels, even though they are Star Wars, they're 3 very separate movies from the originals. The different actors and everything. So I think Marvel's the one that really kind of figured this out, and they let people know, like, hey, you're not going to get typecast. You're actually going to be more popular. But now, now they're saying, the movie stars aren't movie stars anymore. The superheroes are the movie stars. It's a weird time, but it was weird back then when you didn't know. Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
You're excited. Opening night. When do you buy your ticket? And tell me, before any of that, when the trailer dropped, did you watch it on TV or did you take 7 hours to download it on QuickTime?
It definitely, I saw it on TV before I downloaded it on QuickTime or LimeWire. That was
LimeWire.
This is Diablo 2 area, man. This is like, I was in that world for a minute too. So it just, like, to me, to get that actual, to get to see that was like, okay, Star Wars is coming out. And I remember a few of my friends had just not cared about it anymore, but the couple that came with me, we were still into it big and we were just down for it. And then of course, I brought my oldest. So it was like the way you want it. Like, you're going there like old school, like in the teenage, when you're like 80 of your friends, we go to the theater and watch a movie all together and just laugh and just have your own little thing going on, because really that's the way movies are best enjoyed, is doing that. I mean, you can't put it any other way. It's just, and bringing up the Marvel movies too, you are 110% correct on the Marvels giving us so much content, allowing your mind to think about, well, what are we doing in this multiverse? What about this multiverse? And then they throw this at you, and they're throwing so much at the normal fan right now. A lot of people look at Star Wars throwing everything, the Tales of the Jedi. People don't talk about that a lot too, but those are nice little, cool little 15-minute snippets that are, nice, and they help fit a story. That's the biggest problem with a lot of the EU people, is that they said that they had their stories, they had their books, which we will bring up some books coming soon. They had their stories, they had their books, so they would always act like pompous about it, like, blah, 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 blah. Watch, it's just his dad. Okay, watch, they go on. He meets Mara Jade. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool, dude. I don't have all that time. At this time, I'm trying to work, trying to make money to buy these games coming out and go see some movies. So, these guys, like, that's what really gets it. And that's what leads to one of the next movie, honestly, Attack of the Clones. Everybody kind of jets on that. You talked about the music, Attack of the Clones music. Whoop, whoop. That's some good stuff too. And you said it's his best Williams work too. That right there, other than I still will lean 3. 2, that was Attack of the Clones, the music, when you first see Yoda fight, when you see just the wars happening and the build up, and then the eventual love story between Anakin and Padme, it just worked so well. And even though people got to remember, if they say that this is their worst Star Wars film, remember that that's still better than probably 800,000 other films that they've ever seen.
A lot of people say that. Well, we do ranking, and this was the first year we've done it where it wasn't number 11 on, or the last place on our list. I want to bring it up though, because Attack of the Clones was a movie. It came out. I was in my second year of college when it came out, and I'm watching it. And all year, my roommate was obsessed with Star Wars, and he got me onto this thing called the Force.net website. And I bring this up all the time, and it freaking leaked. The whole movie was leaked. So when I went in, I've always said this, I was disappointed. I was let down by the Attack of the Clones. However, when I saw it the next time, like a week later with my parents, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more. And I want to know for you, did you get into any of the leaks at the time? Did you go in fresh? And what were your first honest opinions of Attack of the Clones?
You know, again, it goes back to just being parts of Star Wars and knowing that eventual influence. My first opinion, honestly, to see Dooku fight and manhandle Obi-Wan and Anakin the way he did, easily the way he did, and at that stage of his life, because as we've known, like, you know, after what we won't bring up what he's done in other things, being up those Tales of the Jedi, we all know that a certain somebody dies, but he is going down that path, and you see Yoda show up. I was so excited to go talk about Yoda's fighting and his style and learning that style. You know, like, not learning it myself, but I mean, that'd be a little hard seeing me jump off a wall, do a couple backflips while, you know, wielding. I'd probably end up on my neck somewhere and then in the hospital. All of us. But it was just that took it for me. And then to see them, plus a lot of people forget the war in that. The war when they were in the Coliseum, like that was just that. And of course, we lose Jango Fett. We see Mace Windu get his little cool little moment when he comes walking out through behind the curtains and everything like that. And the Jedi make their presence apparent in there. So the buildup, I don't see why people said it ran slow too, because I even liked it when Anakin and Padme were jumping through the whole metal melting, steel forging area. Like, that was just, in having to fight those guys off, like, that's dramatic to me. If anybody didn't see that, then I don't know if they were really watching it with their own eyes.
My favorite part of that movie, and I say this all the time, is I like what you just said. My favorite part, though, is the speeder chase at the beginning when they're going after Zam Wessel. I don't know what it is about that. I loved it. The Mandalorian episode with Ahmed Best coming up, that reminded me of that moment. I love the speed chase in Coruscant, and that's why I love the pod race and the Phantom Menace as well. These are things that I just love. So you see Attack of the Clones. You're getting older now, right?
Yeah.
Revenge of the Sith is coming. Revenge of the Sith is coming. You have a family, like, Revenge of the Sith is coming. How were you equally excited for Revenge of the Sith? Were you a little bit more muted? Did you buy tickets right away? See it opening night? Was a big group of you? How was that experience?
Yeah, so the group had calmed down a little bit. There is I still, like, my oldest was definitely older at this time, so this was just on. This was like taking over everything in life now. Just Vader this and Vader that. We knew he was coming. Everybody knew he was coming, but man, the workup. You get the trailer, and yes, I went opening day. How could you not pass that up?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to remember too. A lot of people forget about this. You couldn't just get tickets online like that easy. You had to actually like go there and get it early, or you had to figure out, or some people slept out. Like you had other ways.
And no assigned seating.
Yes. Oh, that's so nice now, I gotta say, but you know, things.
Oh, me too. I'm with you on that one. There's no good seats. Next show.
Yeah.
I hated lining up.
D-Box, I did. I remember doing it for wrestling events, getting front row and being out there. But then I was thinking, this is a little unsafe. There's a bunch of people with cash, because most of the time when you went and bought tickets like that, credit cards weren't prevalent, so you had cash. And here I am, like a 15, 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid, sitting out at 4 a.m. downtown with hundreds of dollars myself, next to somebody who has hundreds of dollars, because it would always be the same people. But yeah, we had to get all those tickets. So you know, but to see it, and you just talked about, Chase, even the Anakin starfighter scene right from the go when they get in there, and then it start off with Dooku's fight, and then the way, you know, Palpatine he finally was just like, do it, you know, like he finally knew that he was finally to him. That whole part right there that just set the whole tone for the rest of the movie and reminded you of why you loved Star Wars, why you go on, why you always stay with it.
It's funny, that opening scene, as great as it is, when I went to go see it the first time opening night, there was something wrong with the projector, and the
Oh
audio
no.
for the whole opening was gargled. So it was like they were underwater, talking underwater with water, and blah, blah, blah. And then it
No.
stopped. It stopped sometime after they saved Shivi. At some point it stopped, but then when we left, we actually got free tickets, so we got a ticket to go, and we went right back the next day and watched it again. We're like, well, let's just use it to watch again. So yeah, the first time, the opening scene, it didn't ruin it or anything. It was just, you're like, this sounds terrible. Why does this sound so? It sounded awful.
That's bad too, because you would have had someone goes, "Hey, how was the movie?" and you'd be like, "Well, I don't know. They were underwater for about 15
Well,
minutes."
I was, full disclosure, I was okay with it because in the '90s I had like those boxes that weren't quite
Okay.
legal, and they where you watch and you would watch movies on them, and they'd be like, that's how I saw like a bunch of the, like, RoboCop 3. And
Yeah, I had one of those too.
yeah, RoboCop 3 was just a gargled mess of voices. I'm like, they're robots. So I don't know what's going
Yeah,
on.
it's like, "Hey, this just works. I gotta give it."
I
So
saw,
yeah, that was really what got into it. And now this is where it gets crazy because we do get, we're getting still books for the expanded universe,
yeah.
and we're getting into where they're starting to make more Star Wars games, like you were saying. Like at this point right now we have the actual Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith game. And
Which
you're
is,
actually
in my opinion, a fantastic game.
yeah. I didn't get to play it much. I didn't rent
Oh
it or
yeah,
nothing. I did not. Those ones I did miss.
I bought it used, and I think I still have the disc somewhere for Xbox. Not that I have an Xbox. I have an Xbox. I don't. Anyway, it was it. I would say it was as close to as the fun as a Super Star Wars was. It was
Yeah.
more like, because there were some Star Wars games I'd be excited to play, and I'm like, what is happening? Like, what am I doing? This
Yeah.
game was really good, and you could play as Anakin and win at the end as well, which was
Mhm.
a lot of fun. But I do want to talk about one more thing in Revenge of the Sith, though, before we move on. What was a more
Okay.
iconic moment for you? Was it the Obi-Wan Vader lightsaber fight, or was it Vader's helmet coming down on him? Because we all waited like all those years for that moment, and it came down. I remember
Yeah.
the theater was so quiet, and it just lands, and then you hear the
Mhm.
breathing, and people just like went nuts. So, what was more for you? Was it the lightsaber fight, which many people say is their favorite, and I think you and I are on the same page about them all, or
Yeah.
was it the moment of the helmet being dropped?
So I definitely have to go because the action and the power and the whole lightsaber fight really and is really what writes it. People forget when you could say Anakin's face, y- the way he looked, the pain you could see coming from him when he was talking to Obi-Wan and telling him this is where it ends, going that and how much hatred it was flowing through him and his eyes changing and going on at how delusional he was as well too, how clouded his mind was going at what he did to Padme that he couldn't even understand how he was hurting
Yeah,
her. He had gone so far and he had so much emotions running for him. That to me was so like you could just say riveting, so powerful and explains so much that hearing the breath for the first time is probably just up there as that. But because the whole talk and the way he said, I hate you to Obi-Wan at the end. And, Obi-Wan having, as we all go on and having the nightmares in the series, that's how that debilitated him, how much it took. And we've all watched the series, of course, and no spoilers if you haven't. But to see Obi-Wan that first time when he just got dragged through hot, molten, burning stuff by Vader and just so scared to fight him. But you knew the minute he went into that stance that stance that we loved so much that he did in Revenge of the Sith, that that's what ultimately it's that. But I will say this too, his no when he was told that Padme did not make it and the crunching of the metal all
yeah,
around him had only shown like how much more he had grown, how still raw powerful he was, and how much he still was in that moment technically from that fight.
yeah. And you wonder how much he got out of that moment over the 20 years, the 19 years between that moment. Well, it's even less. It's less than that when we see Obi-Wan, but between that and A New Hope, you wonder. So
Yes.
Revenge of the Sith is over. Star Wars is done. We're not getting any more Star Wars. And then we get this thing
Nope.
called the Clone Wars, and obviously video games. Did you get into Clone Wars at all?
Not initially. No, I didn't have the streaming service that had it or something like that. It was just one of those things where it was just missing. Wrestling has always been one of those things that was really big, and of course, gaming. So gaming, we've talked about it before. Star Wars Galaxies, I played that for a very long time. And that kind of started giving me a little more like, even though those were all their own little stories, they still had stories that were still kind of true to it, because that setting was the Empire Strikes Back setting between Empire and Jedi. So that allowed for you to be a little bit into that story. So for me, that kind of gave me something to be part of for Star Wars leading up to that. Other than, you're right, like it was just rewatch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rewatch 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. How many times did we all do that combination over and over of all those both different combinations?
Yeah, and were you disappointed? Like, because I wasn't. Were you disappointed? I mean, I was in the sense that I would like more, but I also wasn't because I felt like we got what we got. Were you disappointed that there was no more Star Wars coming?
Well, you are sad at that point, but then again, anybody with a good head on their shoulders knows if you go pick up a novel, you have all your access to it. But
Yeah.
do you want to pick up the novel? That's the biggest key. And I think that that's where audiobooks and Star Wars audiobooks actually differentiate themselves from other books, because Star Wars books, if you get an action-packed Star Wars book straight up, it's like watching a movie with your eyes closed. Like,
It's a radio
you hear
drama.
all the shooting. And even a regular Star Wars audiobook also does that too. Now that, when we get into that a little bit, because that's kind of where I started getting into, let's say about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I got into, because my job's driving on the road. So leading up to, the sequels and The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and eventually Rise of the Skywalkers, that's what really gave me, because that allowed me to actually go back. That's where I listened to Master and Apprentice. That's where I listened to all the books like Attack of the Clones. That's how I relived Attack of the Clones. That's how I relived a lot of that. So having all that, over 40 audiobooks, all over 10 to 20 hours each, I listened to practically for years. And I just kept rolling it over and rolling it over. So that, and then that fell right into the sequels.
Before the sequels hit, there was a moment in October of 2012 where word got out that George Lucas had sold Lucasfilm to Disney. There was a picture of Lucas and Iger, and they're like signing it, like, "Hey, it's gone." I've always said this. I was very excited. I liked what Disney had started doing with Marvel at the time. They were only a few years into their Marvel endeavor, but I thought what they did was great because people were loving it. So I was really excited about it. Plus, if you go to the Disney Museum in San Francisco, there's a quote by George Lucas, and he says Star Wars would have been a Disney movie if like Walt Disney was alive, paraphrasing, but around there, because that's kind of what it was. So what was your feeling on, did you have any feeling on it? Did you care? And then when they said right after, like, oh yeah, and we're going to do 3 more movies, what was your excitement level?
So of course, right there, you get back to it. You're like, oh, wait a minute. So now this goes into the next story. So when this is announced, I now have my youngest daughter. So this is where Star Wars actually becomes more than just something that you yourself can experience and experience with others. Now I'm actually taking it to like another like my younger daughter. So she's going to be experiencing it. We're going to be able to experience a new sequels, 3 movies together, the way I was able to experience that with my family when I was growing up. And I'll be able to experience that with my oldest daughter and friends at that time. And now being able to experience that with other friends as well, too. Same, practically around the same amount of friends, going, my youngest daughter, and she, Ray, and then she was getting into it too. She started getting like the Ray, she would get those little kid books, the little comics. There was a lot of kid comics with Ray. in them. So she would get every one of them from the library. We'd go to the library, we'd get that. And that's when I was at the library, that's when I would get my audiobooks. So, it was just all this was going on and it was leading up to. So my initial thoughts, I loved the direction just like you. I said, hey, we're going to get more content. Disney's going to make this happen. And by the way, it made lightsabers easier to get a hold of too, because you couldn't really get a hold of lightsabers, and then you could get some really cool ones and things like that. And you had the different ways that it just opened that whole world up too. So back in the day when you would have to go to eBay and try to find somebody shisty or not shisty selling a lightsaber that doesn't go down and has it in hits detect and all that cool little stuff, you had to go to that place. But now you had this option where it just made up so much more. And you also knew that you were going to get those books and those children books that was going to breed not only the next generation into Star Wars, but was also going to allow us all as parents, and even, in my opinion, a second, third time, because I also experienced Star Wars with my stepson as well, too. He's just really an awesome dude, and he went to the movies as well. So I was experiencing pretty much between my oldest and him the whole time. And then eventually he came for some of those movies and some of the Marvel movies too. He's done that with, my youngest daughter, and it's created that cohesiveness, that joining right there, and giving Disney the green light to do what they want may have been like a very, very hurtful moment for the EU, but for people like us, only allowed us to be able to consume more knowledge of this universe that we want to know so much more about.
You said, and what you said is true, because it hurt the EU, but for me, it never really did, because the books still exist. It's not like they took the books off the shelf and burned them.
Mhm.
It's like you can still read those books. I kind of feel like they should have let some legend stuff still be written and let the canon stuff, like, whatever, have fun with it. I don't really care. But there's two things I want to get into. Is what made you? Was it the excitement of Star Wars coming back, or was it the excitement of seeing? We'll get to the Force Awakens in a little bit, so don't talk about that. But was it the excitement of Star Wars coming back, or was it the excitement of seeing Star Wars again in the Force Awakens that drew? Because you weren't into the books before, but now you're like, okay, I'm going to get these audiobooks. What made you grab those?
That was it. It was really just that announcement, and then finally going, oh, okay, so we're going to get a new movie. But we didn't have The Mandalorian at this time. We didn't have this filled up. We didn't have all these shows, like we had Rebels at this time, of course, but that was still, the Clone War-esque era and things like that. So for me, when I was like, okay, how are we going to do that? And then, of course, she was like, well, get this book. And I'm like, let's just keep getting books. And so I just wanted as much knowledge as possible. And then as all growing up, I always heard about people talking about, everything, aftermath and everything, and Leia eventually becoming a trained Jedi. And I heard all these people, because believe me, I knew some people that got into the comics and got into the books as well too. And they would talk at school, and people like, oh, really? Really? This was time. This was only like, all right, now it's time to learn this universe going into the future, so that way it goes forward with her as well too. So because she practically, had to hear it from me about what happened in Master Apprentice and all those other books. But when I got to Abeloth, when I got to that, going into, the Force Awakens, knowing about Abeloth, it was different. It was, to me, it was like I had hit a Star Wars high, because Luke had encountered one of his most feared, like, he didn't fear her. I guess I should have said that wrong. He was scared of her in ways because of how powerful she was, but he never backed down during that. And that showed that his hope still ran through him, even after losing Mary Jade at this point, and all the, books in between, the Yuuzhan Vaughn War, like we all know about Jason at this point, which, provided so much more. So it gave me so much backstep. So going forward into these next movies, I looked for signs that would go forward. To go forward in this passion, like the next trilogy, I would love to see that go in that kind of fashion, go towards like another super villain other than GVP. Sorry, GVP was cool, but
Yeah, he's had his time. Yeah, I agree. And my hope for whatever they do next is like just have a why. I always said just have a why. Like, why are you making these movies? I know money is a factor, but why for the story? Why for the betterment of Star Wars? Why do I need to watch this movie?
Yeah.
I think
And
TV you can get away with not having the why so much, but even like Mandalorian, the why is Baby Yoda, right? There's like just have the
yeah.
why. Give me a reason, a purpose for it to be, not just we're going to make more Star Wars. That's where I am on it.
And you bring this up about the Book of Boba Fett too, which people just like they go, oh wait, yo, do you know you just got kind of like a story? Well, that's not going to be an EU story. No, listen, it doesn't have to be. Just like there's a multiverse in Star Wars, sometimes I don't think people think the two. Abeloth doesn't even have to be a girl. Yeah, she doesn't have to be the queen of the stars. She could be an entity. She could be, well, I mean, technically she is, but at the same time, they can even cast her as a guy. That could be the next Rey. They could go forward with Rey and have Rey as, Luke's role in those years, trying to train her son. And that son could be definitely named Ben, which would ultimately make the full circle of that. But just change that up. There's so much they can do with that. Will we see it? Probably not. Did I go a little off my rails on one? Probably.
Star Wars is all about going off the rails. Let's go back. Force Awakens is hit in the theater. You have a young daughter now, and yes. I think this is important because Rey was a character. They made it a female lead in Star Wars. I mean, we were kind of like the bait and switch of Finn, whatever. I've been okay with that. I never wanted Finn to have the Force or be a Jedi. Yeah. Like, I was okay with him being Han Solo. Han Solo is my favorite in the originals. Finn was my favorite in The Force Awakens. But the movie started, it's all Rey. And when the movie ended, I'll never forget this. And I really want to hear your perspective with having a seeing with your young daughter. Is my sister, who was in her 20s or whatever, 30s, whatever she was at the time. When it ended, she was like, oh, it was nice to see a kick-ass woman. Like, that was her opinion. I'm sure my wife had it, but I remember my sister was vocal on that when we left the theater, because I think my dad made a joke. but my sister was very vocal on it. So I want to know your opinion. Like, you go in, I don't, whatever you thought of where it was ever, but your daughter, you sing it with your daughter, witnessing with your daughter, and you said she wanted all those books. What was that experience like?
That experience, just, it's the best, because how can't you not want to like pass that on? Like, it's going on right now with football. Like, she's technically a Steelers fan, but I'm a Rams fan, and she's a Steeler fan because of mom, but she loves Patrick Mahomes. Why does she love Patrick Mahomes? Well, because she just watched the Super Bowl. So to see her actually, and then she's pulling up facts, like she was like, hey, Dad, what school did Patrick Mahomes go to? And I'm like, oh, look at you trying to come at me. Like, so you know what I mean? And she get like, so to get that with Star Wars and go in, and you bring up a good point about Rey, and people go, well, she shouldn't have been that powerful with the Force, or she shouldn't be able to go against a trained Kylo Ren / Ben Skywalker. She shouldn't have been. You know what? She was. Do you know why? It didn't matter about her link to Sheevy. It didn't matter. Look at what she had. She had practically a vibrolance. So she already was athletic enough because of her climbing and her junking ways. And we watched it at the beginning. Like, she didn't need the Force to make a lot of those jumps she did. Maybe she was channeling it minimally, but she was making that off of her pure body alone. And then she had fighting skills with that stick, the vibrolance. Yeah. So to translate it, if you watch the actual fight, if anybody does, watch it. You can see her kind of learning how to use just a one-handed sword, but then she kind of starts catching on, because at that point, like they say, the Force awakens in her, and that starts molding. She starts seeing things. And Finn tried it too, but you could tell that he just wasn't strong. Again, goes back to, Star Wars and in the video games, is when you started out as a character in Star Wars Galaxies, not all characters were always Force related. So you could start out a character and you just would never be a Jedi. Of course, they changed that, but at the same time, that's kind of the idea of that Star Wars is not everybody, even though some may be Force sensitive, not everybody has to be a Jedi, because there's a lot of other great stories to tell between Solo, between so many more movies and books.
What did you make of The Last Jedi? So, because Force Awakens, I always call The Force Awakens a donut, right? It's like it's delicious. It's kind of empty calories at the end of the day, but it's a lot of fun. You know, you enjoy it. You're like, okay, great. But then The Last Jedi comes, and The Last Jedi is like, well, guess what? All that fun, you're gonna have a salad now, kid. So you
Yeah.
walk into The Last Jedi because we're around the same age,
Yep.
and a lot of people our age or older can't stand that movie in a lot of ways.
Yep.
I enjoy it. I think it has a lot of highs and it has a lot of lows. I also call it the most
Mhm.
overrated and the most underrated of all the Star Wars films because I think now, if it's your personal favorite Star Wars movie, there's nothing against, like, that's your opinion. I'm
Yeah.
fine with that. But it's just that people are like way too high on it and then way too low on it at the same time. And it's like,
Yeah.
just
There's no
chill,
gray.
man. It's a freaking movie. Like, just relax on it. So I just want to know, like, you go in to see this movie. What were your thoughts on it? Did you enjoy it as much as Force Awakens and all the other movies, or not?
I mean, to me, it looked like it's The Last Jedi. We actually are gonna get to see Luke again, and we don't have to go with pork milk or anything like that stories. Like, although some people probably thought that that was the best part of the movie, but you know, at the same time, so when I would bring up my video games earlier, and I talked about how he had extra force powers that we never really got to see on the main screen. This when he force projected himself, that actually was one of those moments. That was one of those moments you actually got to see how powerful the force could actually be in him being able to transmute himself the way. Now, I'll throw her back in. Abeloth was able to do this multiple times, multiple beings at the same time, and that just shows how powerful she was when she, drank from the well, bathed and all that stuff and got, became who she was. So when I seen Last Jedi, we were already ready to see the darker side. I didn't care so much about Raylo, but I didn't care that it happened either. It was just
Yeah.
something that was just okay, this is gonna happen. Fine with it. I'm cool with it, but I wanted to see how how Kylo was going to turn Rey against Snoke and how he was going to be able, which he actually did. He was able to take down Snoke, which ultimately brings a lot of people's questions up. Was this Ben Skywalker's true plan that when he talked to his father and he told him, pretty much told him there's no other way that this has to be done? That, look, your sacrifice, my sacrifice, everything that's going to end up being will finally bring down this one true, vengeful, hateful Palpatine. And that's what happened. And that's what we got. We got to see, we got answers. Everybody went in with answers. And when we seen that final at the end and everything go down, even going down with the guards, and it just gave you that full aspect of this movie isn't bad. This movie had to happen because Ray wanted to know who she was, and unless they took a whole movie to explain and to have her search her dark side of herself and to see what's open, we weren't going to get that explained in the final movie. So to take that now was the better. And if people hated it, that's their problem. That's their problem because I didn't hate it. Maybe I won't rake it as high as my other ones, but at the same time, it gave us Luke. It gave us Mark Hamill back in that role. That's something we needed. They didn't have to put no plastic face, computer generated face on him. Just him going there in training and not even really having to do too much with Ray
And
was
I
more than
thought,
I think anybody needed.
and he has that moment with R2 on the Falcon when R2 plays Leia's message from A New Hope. It's got a lot of great moments in it. I
Yep.
think so. My biggest gripe with that movie, after all these years now, is the humor. A lot of the humor doesn't land for me still, and it's just like I'm just like just. Can I get?
Yeah, that was bad.
Remember when Blockbuster used to edit out nudity out of movies? I wish
Oh
they could
man.
edit. I would go there and edit out some of the humor out of this one. I know people are getting mad at me, and if you like it, that's fine. I'm not going to argue your opinion.
Yeah, we didn't need those moments, right?
Yeah, there's just like for me, I'm like I don't really need that joke. But anyway, so that movie ends. You hate it with a passion. You go on. You start your YouTube channel. I hate the last Jedi.com. You become a. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But now we've got before that, we got to rewind a little bit. I completely passed this one up. We got our first spinoff before this. and it's
Yes, we
behind
did.
you right now. And you grew up watching A New Hope on VHS,
Yep.
and this one was it 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 was Rogue One. We were getting the opening crawl of that movie in
Oh,
its own movie. Were you
ye-
how excited were you for it? And how many times did you see it in the theater if you saw it multiple
oh,
times?
okay. So I usually am a one for person now. I mean, one of the biggest movies I've seen the most in the theater was Gladiator with Russell Crowe. I bought
Nice.
that soundtrack as well. You know, it was I went and seen that movie, I think 5 times, literally
Wow.
opening day, opening weekend. I was there all weekend. I saw it Friday with my just alone. I saw it with my friends on Saturday, and I saw it with my mom and dad on Sunday. And that was like literally so I only seen it once, but I did not expect this. I didn't go in with any spoilers. I did not see Rogue One opening night because at that point we were just like, okay, mom's working, so let's go see it at this. So loved Rogue One. Of course, I am one of the people that loves Solo too. I love the way whole Solo does everything.
Yeah, I love
You
Solo.
finally get to see the Kessel run, and Han's right, you know. And when this scene happens right here, when this scene
Yeah.
happened, I cannot believe how that this like my mind, my eyeballs, I was in D box. So when he grabbed the guy and
Oh,
went this way,
nice.
and the guy went that way, and the
Yeah.
chair's like, woof, woof, like, ooh, he was shaking when he grabbed that guy, and you felt the. It was like,
That's awesome.
holy, yeah, I could. It was great. I will say this: after I seen this movie, we went home and we started Star Wars: A New Hope.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
there's no other way. Who didn't do that?
Actually, on true story, the first time I saw it, I didn't do it. Then I saw it again because my dad's birthday is December 20th. So we took him to every Star Wars movie. This one, we saw opening night. We didn't take him because his birthday, I think, was the Sunday. So I think we took him. We ended up going later that year, but it was a snowstorm opening night when we went to go see it. So we saw it
Oh,
and we liked it. And we got home. We're like, whatever. I worked the next day. Then when we took my dad for his birthday, went to go see it. We lived in an apartment at the time, and we got home, and my wife got out of the car and she goes, "Let's watch Star Wars." And I was like, "Yes!" And we put it on like right away, and it's just like it's so seamless how it goes
you
into
could
that
do
movie.
it.
It's so brilliant. Yeah, it's so brilliant
It's
and
just
so
it
good.
flows right in. Like he just like just that, and then he just goes
Yeah.
boom, he's right there, and he's after Leia, and everything's getting transmitted, and pods are flying out down to
Yeah.
Tatooine. Like, come on, man.
It's just it's like, people love to say what they say, but it was the perfect Star Wars spin-off movie.
Oh,
The
jeez.
perfect
Yeah,
Star Wars spin-off movie. This would have been a book in the 90s, and now we're getting it in the theater, and it's this
yeah.
good. Shut up. Just take my money. Let's go.
The,
Solo you liked. Were you one of the
yes.
people that were like, I wish we got Obi-Wan, or were you like, I like Han Solo, let's go do this?
Yeah, you look, I'm fine with the way they did Solo. I would do Solo too. I think that there could be so much. I brought that up in the chat the other day with Quentin
Yeah.
Tarantino doing Solo too. Like that would be just freaky weird. But I would just love to see that go work out. And I don't need it though. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
You know, I have all the stories. I read one of the books I think a lot of the people miss, but I think that a lot of people should is the Millennium Falcon. You learn so much about the YT 1300. It's just, I think that was what it is. Anyway, I think I'm right. But at the same time, just seeing that the true purpose of that actual ship, and I'm not going to spoil it. People just go read it. What the actual purpose of that ship is in that book, it explains. But it's just not how Han it went through when Lando had it, how Lando won it, and the other people that had it before that. It was the true story of this ship, and that just right there gave you so much more then and so allowing when Solo came out, that's why I loved it because you get to see Solo. You get a little bit of that book in there. You see so much more. And again, it comes back to the combinations that we get of games now, of movies now, and books now, and how we can just fill in gaps of this in shows now. We can fill in everything that we always dreamed about when we was growing up. When did this happen? What happens after that? And then your little comic book people would tell you, and you'd be like, no, 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 not for me. I want more. And that doesn't mean you were different. It just didn't mean you have time to read a book or something like that. So
Good
that's
point.
really where it goes to.
Rise of Skywalker. This is a movie that not a lot of fans of it, I don't think anymore over the years. I still find it fun. You get your ticket, you go see it. Your daughter's a little older now. What was that experience like? And were you satisfied with the ending? Were you satisfied with the inclusion of CVP? And what were your hopes going forward after this one?
So, of course, everybody's going to have their ideals about how this movie should have went. And going forward earlier, when I was talking about, I wanted to see if they were going to try to set up the next set of films going forward with maybe, which they technically did. And when I just getting the opening scene, of course, you're going to feel it's rushed. Like you just start off and just Kylo's already got the artifact, he goes there and he already encounters him and it's just right there from the go. Of course, if you read the book, you understand that there's a lot more that leads up to that, which is where, the books people are right that you get so much more Star Wars in the book, whether it be the audiobook doesn't cut anything out. So you're literally going to be in it. And to get that listening to that book eased that moment for me, so it didn't allow me to get that feel rushed moment of how a lot of people said that everything just seemed like 1 2 3 4 really fast at the beginning of the movie before it kind of went into it. For me, it was just enjoying that movie and just knowing that, hey, this is going to be the last one. We knew that Pal Shivi, he's back, he's ready, and we want to see what he does. Now for the actual fight, dude was just throwing when he threw that electric bolt up in the air and just shocked every ship in the system. What? Like you didn't see that ever displayed. Like, why did you even need a Death Star? Couldn't he just pointed his hand and be like,
done? Yeah,
done.
Definitely.
He just could just be floating around out in space and.
What's funny is the opening it is fast paced. I found that with Rogue One the first time I saw it too. I felt like even The Last Jedi, I felt like there was an uncertainty at the beginning of these movies where they I felt like they didn't flow very well. Over time, I've gotten used to them and now whatever. But the Rise of Skywalker, for me, I still think they could have cut things from the opening and changed the crawl, and they would have had a smoother opening of a movie, less jarring, less. I know it's weird sounding like you would take stuff out, but I think if they removed a couple of it and just changed the crawl, because that crawl is terrible. If they would it's probably the worst crawl. Everyone loves to say when was it Revenge of the Sith or Attack of the Clones War, that people are like that's the worst. Like no, I think Rise of Skywalker has trumped that one because it's kind of a pointless crawl too. Anyway, we won't get into it. But like I like the movie, but the crawl ends. I think you change the crawl and you can actually remove stuff and it would flow a lot better and be a little less jarring.
I agree with that.
And you could explain
people
you use the crawl to explain. Yep.
Yeah. I think that if they would have just actually started the movie off, they wanted to start the movie off fast pace. And then when they started it off fast pace, this is what got them that thing. If they would have just did a slow build the way they didn't need to do a long build. Like I know that's the way you want to start one of those movies, but like you said, there was a lot of other stuff they literally could have cut out. If they would have just maybe did a little bit leading up to Kylo getting that actual artifact that led him to CVP in the end, that if you actually got the background of that and then removed some of the other stuff, it probably would have flowed definitely a lot better and would have gave you like, why am I doing this right now? Why is this happening right now? Because when it's like going to jump in a pool, but you just already are inside the pool. You're like, wait a minute, I'm already.
It's so true.
And it's like, whoa, it just went right from the go.
Yeah, well, how did I get in here?
Yeah. Like, wait a minute. How's like literally he beats CVP within 10 minutes of the opening scene. And 5 minutes is just us
way too
words.
Fast.
Like that could have been a
so
build,
fast,
and they could have did a lot of selling within that build. So that's
over the time. Yeah, that's movie. Over time, George Lucas wanted to make a live action TV show. We eventually got one in the form of The Mandalorian. I wasn't crazy. I like the idea. I thought he looked cool. I wasn't big on Mandalore during the Rebels and Clone. I was just like, whatever, they're fine. They look cool, whatever. I was never obsessed with. I like Boba Fett now more than I did back then. I know I'm the only one, but but I wasn't a Boba Fett fanboy growing up. He wasn't my favorite figure. I like Stormtroopers better. I wasn't really into Boba Fett. Not to say I didn't like Boba Fett. I didn't really care. I watched the movie if the Josh Trank movie happened. Yeah. So I was fine. So the Mandalorian show comes. I'm like, okay, let's see what we got. What was your expectation, your hope, and what did you make of the Mandalorian when it started? I know you're not a big Grogu fan.
I still love Grogu. I'm waiting for him to hold the Darksaber, but
yeah.
But so when we are all here that we get the Mandalorian, and so this is for me, I'm like, oh, this is back. It goes back to the Solo kind of stuff. This is gunslinger stuff. This is what we need. Everybody, I mean, that's core Clint Eastwood, stuff like that. Like, John Wayne, like that's what makes sometimes it's great to watch people fight with swords. But if you remember what replaced all the medieval movies that were black and white gun smoke, like it was about the shooting and the people dodging and trying not to get hit or trying to get hit. And, just starting adding like it just that right there adds to it. So getting that with the Mandalorian, knowing that we were going to get to see all of his wonderful tools, change that up from toys because we're not going to get copyrighted. So it just was one of those things where it was like, I mean, we all knew when this first started, we were going to get Grogu, but at the same time, when it started out, you get the sense dude's already sliced out, bounty's paid, and you get Carl Weathers, grief, slap. You start seeing the story develop. Then you're like, whoa, this is getting like watching him get beat up by that rock creature too, the bull thing that he eventually got on him. He like that right there, that whole like, of course, like we already know Grogu's around at this point and things like that, but to see all that going down, to see him grow as well, I think a lot of people overshadow where the Mandalorian came from. That he came from armor that didn't match. That he came from doing these little side jobs to getting a job that actually went beyond his purpose, and was told that, by the armorer when he said this is the way. Then he decided to follow that purpose rather than follow that bounty ultimately, and then became attached. So just getting the Mandalorian was opening up a can of worms for everything to come in the future. We knew that, but to actually see it pulled off and to have a likable character, to see him break code and take his helmet off, and we all knew that he was strict on that, going through that because it was well told, but he still did it anyway. And then it leads up to what the series is going on now. Almost like when you say that was the true end, was at the end of season 2 when he goes off with Luke. That's real statement. And that everything else now we're just getting a fun little side. Like, was he just always going to be with Luke and Luke did make him choice? Like, why wouldn't Luke try to at least, give him a little visitation? Because that's what ultimately linked with Grogu and what changed the whole series, I think. Because now we don't get Luke anymore, which is fine. Maybe we will. And that's for the future to be told. But for now, having Grogu with the Mandalorian, it works because they're more than just that bond. They're almost like a team, 100%.
Yeah, I think the Mandalorian ended with season 2, and now it's the Mandalorians or whatever. Like, and now it's like a second half. It's like the second part of their journey, right? It's like, I mean, the story is just as important, but that storyline is over, and now we're in 2.0 is where we are. So in that time now, we've got Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Andor. Did you love all three of them? Was there one that you preferred to the other? And I mean, Andor is very much different. It's such a different show. And are you with me as one of the 7 people that like Boba Fett? Are we 2 of the 7, or are you someone that's like, screw you, Boba Fett, I moved on? What did you think of those ones?
I loved it. I liked Boba Fett because we were getting to see what happened after Jabba was no longer in rule, and to see all the syndicates form and how the spice trading is huge and live, and him trying to say that that's not going to be on my planet. So people, we all knew, like, because we heard from the comic people about that as well, that Boba Fett lived on. So we knew he got out of there. But what happened? And that is what we got with the book of the Boba Fett. And there was nothing to dislike about it. And of the three, I mean, of course, the heart's always going to be with Obi-Wan. I mean, how can you? I already brought up that end fight with Vader when he literally just took his machine apart. He took the machine apart
Yeah.
and just made him a man again.
So
And
good.
God, that scene right there, just even more the thrilling of the eyes when you're looking in Anakin's eye, but still Vader, but then the mask. And then you hear him say, I killed Anakin. That finally
good.
gave him that closure in a way to know that there was nothing he could do to actually change that. And that's why it all goes back to Qui-Gon Jinn always foresaw his death as well too. And that was the one thing that still always, that even though that those things were going to happen, they moved on. And so Obi-Wan for me was just, was fascinating. I thought it was, young Leia was hilarious too. Like, you want to bring up funny comments. I think she definitely got the funniest comments in that whole series.
Yeah.
So she
was good. She was really good.
Yeah. She played the part in it was demanding. Like, you knew that was Leia. You knew, you had no question that powerful being that she was, that was Leia, that her stance, how strong she was at her thing. Like when she called out her cousin for being a punk right in front of everybody, she literally was like, bam, blast.
That's Leia.
In front of the whole family. So that was good. As for Andor, we actually, it was definitely a darker side. We definitely enjoyed it. It took us back to the more of the solo feel again. I'm just gonna bring that up because that's kind of the whole gunslinger thing. It brought it back to that, but to hear, to see Cassian go on with that and to make that story come out and to see and hear you guys talk about it too, that just, why do people not like it? Because you guys bring up a good point. It doesn't always have to be about the laser swords, people. It can be about a good story. It could be about a gunfight. It could be about tactics and droids, which has always been a big part of Star Wars droids. I mean, R2 has literally helped 3 trilogies of people get out of hairy situations. So without these droids, without CP3O, they wouldn't even been able to translate that in Rise of the Skywalker without him. So it all comes back to the droids. It all comes back together. It comes back to all these moments. Can somebody like it? Yes, I'm not going to say you should like this and you should like it all and you should be happy to take it all, because that's what it sounds like I'm saying. Maybe I am, but we should all be thankful that we're getting that and that we're getting this content and that we're getting these areas filled so that when they go forward with whatever way they want to go forward with, if they want to go Old Republic, they want to bring out some Darth Revan, they want to bring out some of that, then that's fine. They don't have to go forward and go to a new age Abeloth. They don't have to do that. Disney can do and tell any story that they want, just like they're doing with the MCU right now. And I'm fine watching it. Yeah, Eternal sucked. Yeah, the whole ending doesn't suck. And all the movies, you could say, well, each one of the cutscenes, it's just nothing is adding up. But I'm fine with watching it. I'm fine seeing Kang in the multiverse. I can't wait to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, because I know that movie is going to be straight up awesome. It's just going to be awesome because all the Guardians of the Galaxies always have just a great base of music and a great movie structure. So we're getting that. And whatever way they do, whatever forward they go with Star Wars, I'm going to be sitting there. Hey, maybe one day I'll be seeing, more Star Wars with the next generation, like the rest of us, and being able to actually experience all those fun times and relive it and hear about the books that they're coming out with and seeing some of the stuff. That's what we want, right?
100% well said as well. Star Wars is dead. Let's move on. Star Trek forever. I heard Picard season 3 is amazing. I haven't seen it yet, but I heard season 3 of Picard is amazing. No, and you started with Star Trek. You got to go back to your roots. All right. Thanks so much.
Did.
This was
Isn't that weird?
this is.
Yeah. You went out. I think you're yeah.
Tell them where they can hit you up everywhere on the socials, online, podcasts, everything.
You can find me at HeatOveride on Twitter, and you can find all of my work. Baseball season coming up with your Toronto Blue Jays hat right there at Dr. Roto. You can find my podcast, Bring the Pain, on there as well. That's more sports oriented. But at the same time, I've got tons of podcasts. I've given out my top 5 villains of all time. We've all discussed it. We've all talked about Star Wars. And that's how you bring the pain. And may the force be with all of you.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks for being my guest today, Rob. And may the force of others be with you.
Hey scumbags, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.